Isekai is, well, does it really need explaining at this point? It used to be contentious to even call portal fantasy anime their own genre, but in recent years, it seems like more anime heroes have been trapped in or transported to fantasy worlds than born in them. If you watch anime, you almost certainly recognize isekai as its own thing and probably have some strong opinions about it one way or another. But as big as stories about ordinary Japanese people in extraordinary worlds have gotten, I don't think it's really useful to look at this genre as that kind of monolith anymore. Isekai is a lot of different things to a lot of different people nowadays, and today we're going to identify and categorize all of those things to make it easier to find the types of isekai you personally enjoy most. This highly scientific classification effort is sponsored by Raycon, who are disrupting the electronics industry by making great sound for everyone. Their wireless earbuds start at half the price of other premium audio brands and deliver seamless Bluetooth pairing and a nice bassy sound in a wide range of fun colors and patterns with a compact, comfortable, noise-isolating fit. That comfort factor is what makes their performer earbuds my favorites for daily use. They're so light and fit my ears so snug and tight that I forget I'm wearing them half the time, which makes them perfect for listening to game and anime music while I'm writing or doing chores, and dozing off to an audiobook when that's all said and done. And thanks to their 32-hour case battery life and 6 hours of playtime, they last through all of that without issue. Even pro athletes like J.R. Smith appreciate their comfort and convenience, and Raycon's so confident that you will too that they offer a 45-day free return policy. And in case that deal needs any more sweetening, you guys can click the link in the doobly-doo or go to buyraycon.com/mothersbasement to get an additional 15% off your Raycon purchase. Now, the most common and, in my opinion, least useful way that fans currently classify isekai series is by their vectors of isekaiization. That is, how the hero ends up in another world in the first place. The least messy option is to simply have them pop through a portal or random rift in reality to arrive there. That might mean a chance encounter with a magical entity on Earth going wrong, or they could just appear in some fantasy town square in a literal blink of an eye. Other times, it's a whole affair involving multiple mages and big summoning circles. In any case, this method is typically the most direct in giving the hero some sort of immediate goal to work toward, be it fulfilling the grand destiny for which they were summoned, or just following the first friendly face they meet on the other side. It also often leaves open the option to return to Earth one day, which can serve as a goal in and of itself, or even become a regular feature of the story, like how Digimon and Gate have their heroes go back and forth between worlds. That's far less likely to happen if our hero's been reincarnated, option 2, though sometimes the other world serves as a test for them to regain their old life. Generally, though, the new video gamey world in which they find themselves is either framed as a permanent reward for all that they went through in life, or if they die in some sort of heroic self-sacrifice, as a place in need of their specific kind of help. But that's only if it's framed at all. Often reincarnation just means popping unceremoniously out of a different P-word opening, with only memories of their past to guide their growth from childhood. And sometimes those memories don't even kick in until much later. Lastly, there's the trapped in a VR MMO variant, which, as the name suggests, involves the hero being transported into the world of their favorite, or sometimes least favorite, video game. A concept that fittingly dates back to video games, specifically Digimon World 3, the Dot Hack franchise, and the anime adaptation of Monster Rancher. Though the most iconic and influential example is obviously that one with the swords. It's worth noting that these stories don't always involve VR, as sometimes the hero's minds are simply transported into their player character from a regular MMO, and that they don't always have to be trapped, as some series focus on the dichotomy between the characters' virtual and real lives. There's also a highly debatable fourth category, time travel, wherein the fantastical world that our hero ends up in is their own planet's past or future. While at first blush it does seem like this category shouldn't be counted at all, the distinct isekai-ness of series like Inuyasha complicates the issue in my eyes. I may well cover this debate in a future video if there's interest, but for today it'd just be a distraction. Because while clearly these distinctions do have some merit, at the same time they don't really tell you much about what you're gonna get out of any specific story that you're getting into. Any category that simultaneously encompasses Re:Zero, Digimon, and Gate is probably too broad to be useful. Personally, I find it far more helpful to think in terms of the experiences these series offer and divide them into genres accordingly. Not anime genres, video game genres. Because, while earlier isekai had a broader focus, the new tsunami that swept across Japanese nerd culture in the wake of SAO's success is predominantly preoccupied, predictably given their progenitor, with providing video game-inspired fantasies. Of course, there are earlier anime that send their heroes into video game worlds, like the aforementioned Dot Hack, Ixion Saga DT, 1999's Monster Rancher, and Captain N, but since SAO, game-like magic systems have become all but ubiquitous within isekai anime, manga, and light novels, not to mention a lot of more straightforward fantasy. This has even spilled into Western fantasy literature in the form of the lit RPG genre, but that's a subject for another day. Or never. Probably never. Speaking of RPGs, though, those are, of course, the first and most obvious type of game experience that isekai seeks to emulate, but far from the only one. RPG elements are present in most isekai, but that's also true of most video games these days, from sandbox simulators to online shooters. RPGs are defined not by their stat progression mechanics, but the structure those mechanics fit into. A long journey with usually a clear, huge goal marking its end, like saving the world or defeating the Demon King, and a lot of room for side-questy digressions along the way. From Monster Rancher to Inuyasha to SAO to Shield Hero, many of the most popular isekai out there fit this formula, selling the basic yet enticing fantasy of a cool gamer guy or gal saving the day and getting the gal or guy for realsies at the end of a grand quest. However, as anyone who actually plays the JRPGs that inspired most of these shows can tell you, that grand quest is more often than not just the bread holding a hulking hoagie of more varied, fresh, and meaty content together. Tim Rogers, the world's greatest video game critic, has described the quintessential JRPG series Dragon Quest as hangout games, where the whole point is chilling with your buds in a fun fantasy setting. And from the thousands of party skits in the Tales series to the Trails series with its insanely talkative NPCs, many of the genre's tentpoles follow this philosophy. So too do many hangout isekai, from Konosuba to Princess Connect. They might set up a demon lord off in the distance or forego such obligatory plot devices altogether, but either way, the demons aren't a threat for now and won't be for the foreseeable future. For every isekai that burdens its hero with a pressing life-or-death quest, there's a dozen that simply create a pleasant setting and charming social circle around which they can rest, relax, and most importantly, have some fun. Also, maybe learn a thing or two about healthy mother-son bonding. I said healthy! Stop that! Hangout isekai are the moe club shows of this category, and many even star moe clubs, like I told you to make my abilities average in the next life. Others build themselves around the traditional family unit known as a harem, while my favorites, like Konosuba and Bofuri, evoke the feeling of a well-rounded JRPG party. There's also some notable overlap between this genre and food porn anime, as the isekai setting provides a nice excuse to draw medieval European cooking in mouth-watering detail. Also, pretty much every karoshisekai, stories where the specific cause of reincarnation is karoshi or death by overwork, offers this kind of hangout experience as an alternative to the drudgery of working life, often quite explicitly. Both By the Grace of the Gods and I've Been Killing Slimes for 300 years and Maxed Out My Level feature gods who take pity on the protagonist for their sad life and give them a chance to live a new one inside Dragon Quest, basically. Not coincidentally, slimes feature prominently in both these series as well. Funny enough, though, the first isekai that springs to mind when I mention slimes doesn't quite fit this mold. That Time I Got Reincarnated as a Slime certainly has impeccable hangout qualities with its huge and delightful cast of characters, and its spin-off, The Slime Diaries, does qualify as a hangout isekai, but the way they're written in the main series feels less like a tight-knit adventuring party's banter than it does the side stories you hear back at base in games like Fire Emblem and Valkyria Chronicles. Likewise, Slime Sekai's action elements reach a much larger scale, with storylines leading up to big, important battles involving dozens of characters and covering a lot of ground, marking it, along with Overlord, Log Horizon, and Gate, as an example of strategy isekai. Or management isekai, if you'd prefer, as some of them can be more focused on economic concerns and political gamesmanship than combat. Though this is anime, so fights usually happen at some point. While the heroes of these stories can often hold way more than their own in a one-on-one fight, they're also positioned above a group of equally capable underlings as military or business leaders, or more often, full-fledged mayors or monarchs of their own cities or kingdoms. Done right, these political power fantasies can make for some of the most compelling entertainment in the isekai space. By their very nature, they have a lot of moving narrative parts in both their huge casts and whatever game and social systems govern their worlds, and a good storyteller can make all of that a ton of fun to keep track of. On the other hand, though, in the hands of an inept storyteller, all of this complex narrative machinery can easily fall to shambles, or otherwise become so stupidly oversimplified as to lose all intellectual appeal. It's no coincidence that this genre also contains two of the worst isekai ever made, High School Prodigies Have It Easy Even in Another World, and The Master of Ragnarok and Blesser of Einherjar. Of course, the absolute worst isekai ever made, Conception, represents a different management game genre entirely: the dating sim. Something that a lot of isekai anime, perhaps even most of them, emulate in some fashion or another. Though there are a few pure examples: How Not to Summon a Demon Lord for the lads and lesbians, The Saint's Magic Power is Overpowered for the gals and gays, and My Next Life as a Villainess for everyone. In most cases, much like RPG mechanics, dating sim elements get blended in to spice up other genres. You'll find them in any story that builds itself around the traditional family unit known as a harem. One such story that was a big guilty pleasure for me in my youth, and which predates SAO by half a decade, is The Familiar of Zero, whose hero, Saito Hiraga, gets summoned to a far-off fantasy land by a seemingly inept tsundere witch named Louise, and must live in her wizard school dorm as her pet. Specifically, her Pokemon-style magic fighting pet, that's the familiar part, which allows the show to blend harem and isekai elements with another familiar genre, shonen battles. Perhaps unsurprisingly, the isekai premise is used as a setup for quite a few Battle of the Week style stories, from Digimon to Drifters to Dog Days. It's as good an excuse as any to give a relatable teenager magic powers and a world full of equally powerful foes to fight. I would love to dub these anime fighting game isekai to keep the metaphor I've got running consistent, but No Game No Life kinda puts a wrinkle in that as a clear example of non-battle anime, and while I could weasel around that by saying chess is technically a fighting game, battle isekai is almost certainly more accurate. A recent Netflix release creates a rickety rope bridge between that genre and our next one, the edge-tastic, high-concept battle royale of High Rise Invasion. which, despite its unintentionally hilarious cheese and obvious yet clumsy gestures toward fan service, manages to feel legitimately ledge-teeteringly tense at times. That's just the power of survival isekai, which use the sudden dislocation that all isekai heroes undergo to leave theirs disoriented and in unfavorable circumstances where a single slip-up could cost them everything. If they get isekai'd with a larger group, like the heroes of Grimgar of Fantasy and Ash, you can expect those numbers to dwindle rapidly. Or, if they come in alone, it's either going to be a very short story or a very long one where you get to see them claw their way up from the bottom of the food chain, one ring at a time, using whatever meager skills they're given to start. That might be a literal food chain, like in So I'm a Spider, So What, which someone really needs to turn into a Minecraft mod or something. Or it can be figurative, like the progression of I'm Standing on a Million Lives farmer protagonist. They do have to actually start at the bottom, though. Much like video games, isekai can be divided into difficulty levels. By my count, there's 4. God Mode, wherein the hero is granted some magical ability or another upon reincarnation that renders most challenges immediately moot. Grind Mode, wherein magical and even godly powers are on the table for the hero, but they have to really work for them. No Mode, wherein the hero's an ordinary, or apparently ordinary human with no aptitude for magic who must get by with their own wits. And Cheat Mode, wherein the hero is an ordinary human whose ordinary human abilities, by which I mean unrivaled genius, athletic ability, gamer skills, or access to modern military hardware, render most challenges immediately moot. Most of the genres I've mentioned today can work at any one of these difficulty levels, though obviously some combine better than others. With survival, though, the struggle is the story, so while SAO might adopt the aesthetic of a survival game, it absolutely does not count. These series need to either provide their heroes with no advantages, like ascendance of a bookworm or now and then here and there, or make them work for it, like Spider. Of course, if an isekai is working on grind mode, then there's every possibility that the protagonist will eventually grow to be completely overpowered. It is a story, so the author can easily balance the difficulty against that growth, but to create a sense of proper narrative progression, the survival phase will usually need to end at some point, after which the isekai in question must shift genres. Typically, this means an overarching quest will be introduced, but there's a lot of overlap in base appeal between survival and strategy isekai, so it can move in that direction as well. Log Horizon kinda follows that progression, though it does move into strategy very quickly. On the subject of struggling, there is, of course, one huge isekai I've yet to mention, Re:Zero, which actually comes pretty close to being visual novel isekai, specifically feeling like something Kotaro Uchikoshi might design, but that doesn't really encapsulate everything it is. No single genre does. It's got the tension of a survival isekai, kinda, except that Subaru can't die, and a fair bit of strategy, but rarely from a top-down perspective. Our hero's more a cog trying to move the machine from within. And really, none of those things are what Re:Zero's really about. They're just narrative vectors through which the series can explore the inner mind of Subaru and its other characters. There are other series like this, Mushoku Tensei and Tanya the Evil spring to mind, that focus more on character development and psychology than escapist fantasy, that in many cases actively undermine their escapism to challenge their heroes and their audience. I'd call this dark isekai or subversive isekai, but I think Vision of Escaflowne, Brave Story, Dot Hack Sign, and a lot of other older gen isekai are cut from roughly the same cloth. And a lot of those aren't particularly dark, even if there's darkness in them. Though now and then, here and there, definitely is. Do not watch that show unless you want to get profoundly bummed out and see some profoundly fucked up shit. But on the other hand, even Re:Zero, while it's got a reputation for edginess and definitely gets pretty bloody, is by and large upbeat, optimistic, and triumphant in tone. It just makes sure those triumphs are hard-earned and don't last long. If we branch out from proper gaming genres to half-genre buzzwords, we could call these cinematic isekai or adventure isekai at a stretch, but I think the analogy's already broken down by this point, and there are other aspects of isekai to which gamer logic just doesn't apply. Mecha's not a game genre, even if it kind of is and should be, but mecha isekai are definitely a thing that's worth noting, as are parody isekai, which can spoof video games, as Konosuba does with Dragon Quest's oeuvre, Combatants Will Be Dispatched does with the likes of Phantasy Star and Star Ocean, and Ixion Saga DT does by saying all MMO players are virgins. It's actually a lot funnier than that one joke might lead on, and I highly recommend it if you like comedy isekai. But parodies are just as likely to send up the isekai genre itself as Cautious Hero and Full Dive do, or touch on some other aspect of pop culture, like That Time I Got Reincarnated as Yamcha, which you absolutely need to read if you haven't already. And all that's still just the tip of the iceberg in terms of the comedic possibilities of the isekai premise. Magical Shopping Arcade Abenobashi sends its characters through multiple worlds, each one representing a different aspect of otaku culture. Tsubasa Reservoir Chronicle does something similar, but more seriously, sending its characters through various interconnected clamp worlds in an odyssey of self-discovery. Kinda like Kingdom Hearts. Wait, is Kingdom Hearts isekai? Technically, with the Twui crossover bringing Sora to Shibuya, it's entering reverse isekai territory now, which is its own can of worms. Such stories explore how fantastical and fictional elements might affect and be affected by the real world, which can easily have nothing to do with video games, even if the reverse isekai characters come from video games, like Recreator's Meteora or Sonic X's Sonic. And even when game systems and tropes do come into play, the real-world application often gives them a satirical bent. For instance, a central joke in The Devil is a Part-Timer is that Satan-kun thinks minimum wage jobs work like an RPG progression system. Still, while these game genres clearly have their limits, they do cover the vast majority of isekai that exist today, including a few from long before the boom. And if you're looking to immerse yourself in an escapist fantasy, which we all need from time to time, they can help you zero in on the ones you love most. Of course, there are more series out there than I was able to cover today, so I'd greatly appreciate it if you could tell me and your fellow basement dwellers down in the comments what your favorite isekai genre is and what anime you think best represent it. If you're wondering what to watch next, I recently did some ruminating on how To Your Eternity portrays its protagonist's inhuman perspective, which, in my opinion, is about as well written as my Mushoku Tensei piece. Also on screen if you haven't seen that. I'm Geoff Thew, professional shitbag, signing out from my mother's basement.